In the pitch-black night by the sea, a lonely old black man who lost his wife and child carefully inspects the lighthouse beacon. Suddenly, he spots a small figure being thrown against the rocky shore by the waves. He rushes down, gathers the trembling girl into his arms and takes her home, raising her as his own for 10 years. Until one day the girl's real father appears and the entire town descends into chaos. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thought. The wind off the Atlantic carried salt and memory through the narrow streets of Port Haven, Maine. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, where fishing boats bobbed in the harbor at dawn, and where the lighthouse on the rocky point had stood sentinel for over a century. Elias Turner walked the weathered path to the lighthouse as he did every evening, his worn jacket pulled tight against the October chill. At 58, his face bore the lines of a man who had known both joy and unthinkable loss. His dark skin, weathered by years of sea wind, caught the fading amber light as the sun dipped toward the horizon. He moved with the quiet purpose of someone who had made this journey thousands of times. His hands, coal-used and strong despite his age, carried a thermos of coffee and a small bag of tools. The lighthouse didn't technically need a keeper anymore. Automated systems had replaced the human touch decades ago. But Elias came anyway, every single night. 10 years ago, on a night when the sea had turned savage and the wind howled like something alive, Elias had lost everything that mattered. His wife Margaret and their daughter Sophie had been returning from visiting Margaret's sister in Portland when the storm hit. Their car had skidded off the coastal road and plunged into the churning waters below. Search teams had worked for days. They found the car crushed against the rocks 50 feet down, but they never found the bodies. The ocean had taken them and refused to give them back. After that, something in Elias had broken, but something else had been forged. He began coming to the lighthouse every evening, checking the automated systems, cleaning the lens, making sure the light burned bright through every night. When people asked why, when they told him the Coast Guard had it handled, he would simply say someone needs to make sure it's working. But that wasn't the whole truth. The truth was that Elias couldn't bear the thought of anyone else losing someone in the darkness. Couldn't stomach the idea of another family torn apart because a light had failed. So he became the guardian of this beacon, not because ships needed it, most relied on GPS now, but because his heart needed it. Inside the lighthouse he climbed the spiral stairs, his footsteps echoing in the cylindrical space. The walls were covered with old photographs, relics from the lighthouse's working days. Stern-faced keepers from the 1800s stared out from faded frames. He'd added his own photos too. Margaret's smile, Sophie's graduation from middle school, their last family Christmas. He never took them down. At the top, in the lamp room, he performed his ritual. Check the bulb, still good. Clean the Fresnel lens, spotless. Test the rotation mechanism, smooth as ever. The light would turn on automatically at dusk, but Elias always stayed until he saw it illuminate, casting its beam across the darkening waters. Tonight, as the light blazed to life, he stood at the gallery rail outside, hands gripping the cold metal. Below, waves crashed against the rocks in their eternal rhythm. The town spread out behind him, lights beginning to twinkle in windows. Fishing boats were secured in the harbor. Everything looked peaceful, but Elias knew better. The sea was never truly at peace. It was patient, waiting, and sometimes it was cruel. "Still here, Margaret," he whispered to the wind. "Still keeping the light on." A gull cried somewhere in the gathering dark. He thought about the families in town, going about their evening routines. Dinner cooking, kids doing homework, couples sitting together watching television. Normal life, the kind he used to have. Now his evenings belonged to this light, to this solitary vigil. Some of the townspeople thought he was crazy, old Elias and his obsession with the lighthouse. But others understood. Mrs. Moore at the market always gave him a discount on his groceries. Tom Breslin, who ran the hardware store, never charged him for the cleaning supplies he used on the lighthouse. They knew what loss looked like, even if they couldn't fully understand its weight. As full darkness settled, Elias descended the stairs and sat in the keeper's cottage attached to the base of the lighthouse. He'd moved here after the accident, unable to stay in the house he'd shared with his family. The cottage was small, just a bedroom, a kitchen barely bigger than a closet, and a sitting room with a wood stove, but it was enough. He poured coffee from his thermos and opened the worn journal he kept. Every night he wrote a few lines. Sometimes about the weather, sometimes about repairs needed, sometimes just light is on, all is well. Tonight he wrote October 15th, clear skies, light burning steady, wind from the northeast, water calm but that will change, can feel it in my bones, storm coming in a day or two. He closed the journal and looked out the window at the rotating beam cutting through the darkness. Round and round it went, faithful and true, a promise made of light. Some people prayed in churches. Elias prayed here in the presence of this beacon, and his prayer was always the same, that no one would be lost in the dark, that every soul at sea would find their way home. He didn't know it yet, but in 2 nights the sea would answer him, not with cruelty this time, with a gift. As he locked the cottage door and looked up one last time at the light, Elias Turner thought to himself what he thought every night: some lights aren't for ships, they're for hearts. Then he walked back toward town through the darkness, his own small flashlight bobbing in front of him like a miniature beacon guiding him home. The storm hit Port Haven like a hammer on the second night after Elias had felt it coming. By 7 p.m. the wind was shrieking through the streets, rattling windows and tearing shingles from roofs. Rain came in horizontal sheets, so thick you couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. The harbor churned white with foam, and fishing boats strained against their moorings. Elias had prepared. He'd secured everything in the cottage, double-checked the lighthouse systems and stocked extra batteries. The automated light was working perfectly, its beam cutting through the storm with mechanical precision. But Elias stayed anyway. He always stayed during storms. By 9 p.m. the wind had reached near hurricane force. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the walls. Lightning turned the world blue-white for split seconds, revealing a sea gone mad with rage. Elias made one final check of the lighthouse, climbing to the lamp room. The light rotated faithfully, cutting through the chaos. He stood at the gallery rail inside, watching nature's fury through the thick glass. This was what it had been like the night he lost them. Then, during a brief lull in the wind's howl, he heard something. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. Faint, thin, barely audible, but there. A cry. Elias grabbed his heavy-duty rain gear and emergency flashlight. He pulled on the waterproof coat, cinched the hood tight, and headed down the spiral stairs. Outside, the world was chaos. Trees bent horizontal. Rain pelted him like stones. The cry came again, clearer now, from the beach direction. "Hello," Elias shouted into the wind, but his voice was swallowed instantly. He started down the rocky path, one hand gripping the guide rope. The path was treacherous, slick with rain and sea spray. Waves were reaching higher than he'd ever seen. Lightning flashed, and in that brief illumination, Elias saw it, a small figure lying on the beach, partially in the water, a child. His heart seized. He scrambled down to the beach. Another wave crashed in, and he saw the water try to pull the small body back toward the sea. No, Elias lunged forward. He reached the child just as the water receded. A little girl, maybe 10 or 11, soaked through, her skin deathly pale. Her lips were blue. But when he pressed fingers to her neck, a pulse, weak but there, she was alive. Elias scooped her up, shocked by how cold she was. Another wave was building. He turned and fought his way up the path, the wind pushing against him, the wave hitting his legs trying to knock him down. But Elias had lost his family to this ocean. He would be damned if he lost this child. He made it up from the beach, but as he passed one of the old beach cottages near the lighthouse, he realized the girl needed immediate help. The old Morrison place, empty for years, but it had a covered porch. He carried her up to the porch, at least getting her out of the direct rain. The door was locked. The porch would have to do. Elias laid her carefully on the wooden boards under the deep overhang. He checked her breathing, shallow and irregular. Her pulse was weak, water in her lungs possibly. His paramedic training kicked in. He tilted her head back, cleared her airway and began rescue breathing. 30 seconds, a minute. He checked for a pulse again, still there, slightly stronger. The girl suddenly coughed, water trickling from her mouth. Elias quickly turned her on her side as she choked up seawater. Good, her lungs were clearing, but she was still unconscious, still dangerously cold. He pulled off his heavy waterproof coat and wrapped it around her, then his thick wool sweater, creating layers over her wet clothes. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands. 911, what's your emergency? This is Elias Turner at Rocky Point, near the old Morrison cottage. I found a child on the beach, girl, maybe 10 or 11, she was in the water. I've cleared her airway, she's breathing but unconscious, severe hypothermia. I need immediate assistance. Mr. Turner, we have multiple emergencies from the storm. The bridge access is flooded. Coast Guard helicopters are grounded. We can't get to you until the storm passes, probably not until dawn. Elias's stomach dropped. How long? At least 6 hours. She might not have 6 hours. Do what you can to keep her warm, and monitor her breathing. We'll get to you as soon as possible. Elias hung up and positioned himself against the wall, pulled the girl onto his lap, and wrapped his arms around her, sharing his body heat. He draped a nearby tarp over them both. Come on, he said. Stay with me, help is coming. He monitored her breathing constantly, talked to her, kept watch through the long dark hours. Around midnight, she stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, striking green, even in the darkness. Where? The word was barely a breath. You're safe. I found you on the beach. My name is Elias. What's your name? She stared at him, confused and frightened, tried to speak but couldn't. In a flash of lightning, Elias noticed something glinting at her neck, a silver chain with a crescent moon pendant. He carefully lifted it. On the back, an engraving, to Clara, my little wave. Mom, Clara, Elias said gently. Is that your name? The girl looked at the pendant, her brow furrowing. Tears filled her eyes. I don't know, she whispered. I can't remember anything. It's okay, this necklace says Clara. Do you remember what happened? She shook her head weakly. Everything is dark. You're going to be okay. Help is coming. Just stay with me. Her eyes closed again. Elias held her through the remaining hours until dawn finally broke and sirens approached. Paramedics rushed forward. Elias reported everything. The rescue breathing, the necklace. They loaded Clara into the ambulance. Elias climbed in beside her. At Port Haven Medical Center, doctors worked quickly. Severe hypothermia, near drowning, but stable. When Clara woke hours later, she was in a hospital bed, warm and safe, but her eyes held nothing but confusion. Detective Sarah Morrison arrived with a notepad. She was a kind woman in her 40s with gentle eyes. Hello, sweetie, Sarah said softly. I'm Detective Morrison. Can you tell me your name? Clara's fingers went to the necklace at her throat. The man, Elias, he said. It says Clara. Do you remember your last name? Where you live? Clara's face crumpled. I don't remember anything before the water. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Why can't I remember? A doctor stepped in. She has retrograde amnesia, likely from the trauma of near drowning. Sometimes memories return, sometimes they don't. We'll need to run more tests. Sarah photographed the necklace carefully. We'll check missing persons reports, try to find her family. Over the next 3 days, Clara remained in the hospital under observation. Elias visited every morning and evening, bringing small gifts, a stuffed bear from the hospital gift shop, a book of ocean stories, a warm blanket. Clara's face would light up each time he entered. You came back. Of course I came back. Why? You don't even know me. Because you needed someone, and I was the one who found you. That means something. Detective Morrison worked tirelessly. She filed reports across New England, contacted Coast Guard stations, checked boat registrations, showed Clara's photo to every police department within 200 miles. She brought the necklace to jewelers, trying to trace its maker. Nothing. No missing persons reports matched Clara's description. No boats had been reported missing in the storm. No accidents on coastal roads. The necklace appeared to be custom-made, but no jeweler recognized the design. It was as if Clara had materialized from the ocean itself. On the 4th day, social worker Janet Torres arrived at the hospital. She was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes, and a no-nonsense demeanor. Hello, Clara, Janet said, sitting beside the bed. I'm from Child Protective Services. I'm here to help figure out what happens next. Clara looked frightened. What happens next? Well, Detective Morrison has been searching for your family, but so far we haven't found anyone. So we need to find you a temporary place to stay while we keep looking. Temporary place, a foster home, a family that can take care of you until we find your real family. Clara's hand clutched the blanket Elias had given her. "Can't I stay with Elias?" Janet glanced at Elias, who stood near the window. "Mr. Turner isn't a registered foster parent. There are procedures, background checks, home inspections. I'll do whatever's required," Elias said quietly. "If it means Clara has a stable place while you search." Janet studied him. "You understand, this could take months, maybe longer." "I understand. And you're willing to take on that responsibility. A child you've known for less than a week." Elias looked at Clara, who was watching him with desperate hope in those green eyes. He thought about Margaret and Sophie, about the hole they'd left in his life. He thought about 10 years of empty evenings in an empty cottage, keeping a light burning for people who would never see it. "I pulled her from the ocean," Elias said. "I kept her alive through that storm. I can keep her safe while you find her family. She shouldn't be with strangers right now. She's been through enough." Janet was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. "All right, I'll start the paperwork. But Mr. Turner, this is a big commitment. Are you sure?" "I'm sure." The process took another week. Janet came to the lighthouse cottage with a clipboard and inspected everything. The small second bedroom, where Clara would sleep, the kitchen, the bathroom. She interviewed Elias about his background, his finances, his reasons for wanting to foster Clara. "I was a paramedic volunteer for 15 years, Elias explained. "Before my wife and daughter died, I know how to take care of people, and Clara, she needs stability right now. Consistency, not being shuffled between foster homes while you search." Janet ran his background check. Clean record. No arrests, no complaints. Former paramedic, as he'd said. Decent pension from his years working at the Port Haven Hospital before he retired. References from townspeople, Mrs. Moore, Tom Breslin, even Mayor Hendricks, all spoke well of him. "He's a good man," Mrs. Moore told Janet. "Quiet, keeps to himself, but good. He's been through hell, and came out decent. That girl could do a lot worse." On day 8, Janet returned to the hospital with papers. "It's approved. Temporary foster care arrangement. Clara will stay with you, Mr. Turner, while we continue searching for her family. We'll check in weekly. Clara will need to see a therapist to help with the trauma and memory loss, and if at any point this becomes too much, it won't," Elias said firmly. Clara was discharged that afternoon. Elias signed papers, received instructions from doctors and social workers, and finally led Clara out to his old truck in the parking lot. She was wearing donated clothes from the hospital, jeans and a sweatshirt that were slightly too big. She clutched the stuffed bear and blanket Elias had given her. She looked so small, so uncertain. "Ready to see your new home?" Elias asked gently. Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. The drive to the lighthouse took 15 minutes. Clara was quiet, staring out the window at the gray November ocean, her fingers worrying the pendant at her neck. When they pulled up to the lighthouse cottage, she looked up at the tall white tower with something like awe. "That's where you were when you heard me?" "Yes, at the very top." The light was on, cutting through the storm. "I happened to look down at the beach at just the right moment. The light saved me," Clara said softly. "The light and a stubborn old man, who doesn't know when to go home in bad weather." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. The first smile Elias had seen. He led her inside the cottage. It was small but clean, warm from the wood stove, smelling faintly of coffee and wood smoke. He'd spent the past 2 days preparing, cleaning thoroughly, buying new sheets and blankets, putting up cheerful curtains in the second bedroom. "This is the living room," Elias said, giving her the tour. "Kitchen's through here. Bathroom. And this." He opened the door to the small second bedroom. "This is your room." Clara stepped inside hesitantly. The room was tiny, barely big enough for the single bed, small dresser, and bookshelf, but the bed had a colorful quilt. The bookshelf held books Elias had bought at the thrift store, stories about the ocean, adventures, a few classics. There was a lamp on the dresser, and a small mirror on the wall. Clara's eyes filled with tears. "This is mine, this is yours, for as long as you need it. But you don't even know me. I don't even know me." Elias knelt down to her level, looking into those green eyes that held so much confusion and fear. "Listen to me, Clara. I know enough. I know you're brave. You survived something that would have killed most people. I know you're strong. You're still standing after losing everything you knew. And I know that on the worst night in years, the sea brought you to my lighthouse. Maybe that was chance. Maybe that was fate. But either way, you're here now. And I'm not going to let you face this alone. But what if they never find my family? What if I never remember? Then we'll figure it out together. One day at a time. Clara thought about it. Then tentatively, could I call you Dad? Just until they find my real family. Elias felt his throat tighten. Yes, you can call me Dad. Okay. She took a shaky breath. Okay, Dad. The word hung in the air between them, fragile and new, but somehow exactly right. Time moved differently at the lighthouse. Days flowed into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years, marked not by calendars, but by the rhythm of the sea, and the turning of the light. Clara grew from a traumatized girl into a bright, capable young woman, under Elias's patient care. She attended Port Haven Elementary, then the middle school, and finally the high school. Teachers marveled at her resilience and quiet intelligence. She made friends slowly, but the friendships she formed were deep and lasting. Every day after school, she'd walk the familiar path to the lighthouse. Elias would be there, usually working on maintenance. The automated systems were reliable, but the building itself required constant care, wood to be painted, metal treated against salt corrosion, windows cleaned. Clara learned it all. By age 12, she could identify every part of the Fresnel lens. By 13, she could perform basic electrical repairs under Elias's supervision. By 14, she was climbing the stairs every evening beside him, checking systems and cleaning the lamp room as naturally as breathing. Why do you do this every night? She asked once, when she was 15. They sat in the lamp room watching the sun set. The light works automatically. Elias was quiet for a moment, his weathered hands on the rail. He was 68 now, hair completely white, movement slower than when he'd pulled her from the beach. What do you see out there? He asked, pointing at the horizon. Water, sky, the fishing boats coming in. That's what you see with your eyes, but the sea is never truly still. There's always current beneath, always weather beyond the horizon. That water can turn deadly in an hour. He paused. People think lighthouses are just practical things, but they're more than that. They're promises. A lighthouse says, I'm here, I'm watching, I won't let the darkness win. Someone has to keep that promise, but you didn't make that promise originally. No, but I made my own promise after I lost my family, that no one else would be lost in the dark if I could help it. Promises matter, Clara. They're what separate us from the sea. It makes no promises, but we can choose to keep our word, to be reliable when everything else is chaos. Clara leaned against his shoulder. You kept your promise for me. Yes, and I always will. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, and the light blazed to life, beginning its eternal rotation. The years passed peacefully. Clara excelled in school. The search for her biological family had long since gone cold. Whatever her past had been, it was gone. She was Clara Turner now, Elias's daughter in every way that mattered. But as she reached 16, then 17, Port Haven itself began to change, and not for the better. The fishing industry had declined steadily. Regulations tightened, fish populations dwindled. Young people left for cities with better opportunities. The town's population shrank. Main Street acquired vacant storefronts. The elementary school combined grades because enrollment had dropped. People were worried. People were desperate. That's when the rumors started about Richard Gray. Gray was a real estate developer, a self-made millionaire who'd built an empire through shrewd deals. He owned resort properties up and down the coast, luxury developments that brought tourists and money to struggling towns. Word spread that Gray and Company was interested in Port Haven. The first town meeting about it happened on a cold November evening. Clara attended out of curiosity. She came back troubled. They're talking about building a resort, she told Elias as they cleaned the lamp room. Bringing tourists, jobs, money. But Dad, she'd called him that for years now.
Some people said they'd have to tear down old things to make room. Elias's hand stilled. Did anyone mention the lighthouse? Her silence was answer enough. Over the next months, Gray and Company's plans became clearer. They wanted to build Port Haven Retreat, a luxury resort with marina, spa, restaurant, and 50 high-end cottages. It would employ locals, draw tourists, revitalize the economy. The catch was location. The best spot, with dramatic ocean views and a natural harbor suitable for a marina, was the rocky point where the lighthouse stood. The lighthouse itself, they argued, was obsolete, automated, no longer needed in an age of GPS, just taking up prime real estate. They proposed demolishing it and building the resort's centerpiece restaurant where it stood. The town divided sharply. Half saw salvation, jobs, money, a future instead of slow economic death. The other half saw betrayal. The lighthouse was Port Haven's soul, its history, its identity. Elias said nothing publicly at first, but Clara saw the worry in his eyes, the way he'd stand on the gallery longer each evening, his hand on the rail as if memorizing it. They won't actually do it, will they? Clara asked. She was 17 now, about to graduate. The lighthouse has been here over 100 years. Money usually wins, sweetheart. Elias said quietly. People need to eat, need jobs. They'll tell themselves the lighthouse can be replaced, that a memorial or plaque is enough, but it's not. No, it's not. When the official town meeting was scheduled to discuss Gray and Company's proposal, Clara decided to speak. Elias watched her practice, pride and worry warring in his chest. You don't have to do this, he said. Yes, I do. Someone has to speak for the light. Then I'll be there beside you, Elias said. The night of the meeting, the community center was packed. Every seat taken, people standing along walls. Gray and Company's representatives presented their proposal with impressive graphics and economic projections. Hundreds of jobs, millions in revenue, property values rising, Port Haven becoming a destination instead of a backwater. When they finished, the mayor opened the floor to public comment. 3 people spoke in favor: business owners desperate for customers, parents wanting opportunities for their kids. Then Clara stood. A murmur went through the crowd. Everyone knew Clara, knew her story. My name is Clara Turner, she began, voice steady despite her nerves. 17 years ago the sea almost killed me during a storm. I should have died, but I didn't, because Elias Turner was at the lighthouse. He saw me on the beach from the lamp room and saved my life. She paused, looking around at familiar faces. I don't remember my life before that night, but I know who I am now, the girl the light saved. If Elias hadn't been there, if the lighthouse hadn't been his reason to be watching during that storm, I'd be dead. Mrs. Moore wiped her eyes. This lighthouse isn't just a building, Clara continued, voice growing stronger. It's a promise Port Haven made over a century ago, to guide people home, to keep watch, to be a light in darkness. You can't measure that in money. That light has saved lives. Mine is one. You can't measure its worth in dollars. She sat to scattered applause. Some nodded, others remained unmoved. Then Elias stood. The room quieted. Elias rarely spoke publicly. I won't take much of your time, his deep voice carried easily. I know you're tired, scared for your children and your future. I understand. He took a breath. But when you tear down a light, the darkness doesn't just stay the same. It gets bigger, it gets bolder. And once you've given it that ground, you never get it back. He let that sink in. I'm an old man. I've lived with grief longer than some of you have been alive. There are worse things than being poor. Being rich in a place with no soul, no history, no promise to keep. That's worse. That's poverty you can't buy your way out of. His eyes found Clara. He smiled slightly.
But you'll vote how you vote. I just wanted you to hear from someone who's spent 20 years keeping a promise. They matter, promises. Even when nobody's watching. Especially then. He sat down. The room was silent. Something had shifted. The vote was scheduled for the following month. Port Haven would think, discuss, argue and decide what kind of place it wanted to be. Walking home that night under stars, the lighthouse beam sweeping over them, Clara asked, Do you think we changed any minds? Maybe, maybe not, but we spoke our truth. I'm scared. Me too, Elias admitted, squeezing her hand. But fear or not, the light would keep burning. Elias would keep his promise. That's what you did when you loved something. You showed up, you kept watch, you refused to let darkness win. Even when darkness wore a suit and carried a briefcase full of money. The month between the town meeting and the vote felt endless. Port Haven fractured into opposing camps. You could walk down Main Street and feel the tension, neighbors who'd been friends for decades barely nodding to each other now. The pro-development crowd wore future forward buttons, held signs in shop windows. Jobs for Port Haven. They organized phone banks, went door to door, arguing that sentiment was lovely but didn't pay bills. The preservation group was smaller but vocal. They created Save Our Light signs, circulated petitions. Mrs. Moore hung a huge photograph in her market window, the lighthouse in 1952, with her grandfather standing proudly beside it. Elias and Clara found themselves at the center of the preservation effort, whether they wanted to be or not. People asked them to speak at rallies. They declined. They weren't activists by nature, just two people who believed in keeping promises, but their refusal to grandstand didn't protect them from backlash. It started small. Clara would walk into the school cafeteria and conversations would stop. People would stare, then turn away. Her friend group dwindled to just Maya and Jordan, both of whom thought the lighthouse should stay. Then it escalated. Someone spray-painted "Progress" passed on the lighthouse path. Elias cleaned it without comment. Next week, trash was dumped at the lighthouse base. Elias bagged it up and took it to the dump. Clara faced worse at school. People she'd known for years turned cold. In history class, Ryan Mitchell, whose father owned the struggling marina, raised his hand. My dad says some people care more about old buildings than their neighbors starving. Says that's pretty selfish. He didn't look at Clara. Everyone knew who he meant. Clara's face burned. She said nothing. After class, Mr. Dennison pulled her aside. Don't listen to them. This town is scared. Scared people say things they don't mean. Do they? Clara asked quietly. Or do they finally feel safe to say what they always meant? When she got home, Elias was on the gallery checking the light. She could see exhaustion in his shoulders. He was 70 now, and the stress was taking its toll. They worked together in comfortable silence. Their language, built over years of shared labor. Had some visitors today, Elias said as he tightened a bolt. Larry Henderson and Bill Shaw. Clara knew them. Both had been friendly to Elias for years. What did they want? To tell me they'd be voting for the development. Elias's voice was matter of fact, but she heard the hurt underneath. Larry's business is down 60%. Bill's thinking of closing, moving to Portsmouth. They wanted me to understand it wasn't personal. But it is personal. Clara said, anger tightening her voice. They're voting to destroy your home. Our home. Because they're scared, Clara. People do desperate things when they're scared. Doesn't make it right, but it makes it human. Clara set down her wrench harder than necessary. I'm tired of understanding. I'm tired of being patient while everyone treats us like villains. We're not trying to hurt anyone. We just want to keep something good. I know, sweetheart. Do you ever regret it? The question burst out. Taking me in. If you hadn't, you could have left. You'd just be some guy who used to live here, not the stubborn old man standing in Progress's way. Elias set down his tools and turned to face her fully, eyes serious but warm. Clara Turner, you listen to me. Taking you in was the best decision I made in the second half of my life. You gave me purpose when I thought purpose was dead. You gave me love when I thought my heart was used up. Don't you ever regret being my daughter, because I have never once regretted being your father. Understand? Tears spilled down her cheeks. I understand. He pulled her into a hug. They stood on the gallery as the light rotated around them, bathing them alternately in brilliance and shadow. The tension peaked the week before the vote. Gray and Company made their final push, a full-page ad in the Port Haven Gazette with architectural renderings. Sleek, modern, beautiful in its sterile way. They listed projected economic benefits in bold numbers. At the bottom, Port Haven deserves a future, not just a past. 2 days later, everything changed. Clara was in the market buying groceries when Richard Gray himself walked in. She'd never seen him in person. Mid-50s, fit, expensive suit even in casual settings, the confidence of someone who always won, salt and pepper hair, sharp blue eyes that assessed everything. He didn't notice Clara at first. He was on his phone, voice carrying across the store. Don't care about the optics, Michael. We've put too much into this. If they vote no, we pull out entirely and let them rot. There are a dozen other towns that would kill for this. He paused, listening. The lighthouse. It's a pile of brick and brass. We'll build a better monument. Hell, we'll name the restaurant after it. The Keeper's Table or something. People love that nostalgic crap. Mrs. Moore's face went stony. Clara felt her stomach turn. Gray ended his call and approached the counter. Just these. He set down expensive water and a protein bar. Mrs. Moore rang him up in silence. You're not wearing a button, Gray observed, gesturing to the future forward pins. Not a fan of progress. I'm a fan of not tearing down my grandfather's legacy for a restaurant that'll serve $15 hamburgers. Gray's smile didn't waver. Your grandfather's legacy will be honored. We're not monsters. Do you? Clara heard herself say. Gray turned, noticing her for the first time. I'm sorry, do you understand what it means? Clara stepped forward. Because from what I just heard, it sounds like you think it's just marketing material. Nostalgic crap were your words. Gray's expression cooled. You must be Clara Turner. I've heard about you, and I've heard about you. I heard you vitalize communities. Funny how that always means erasing what was there and replacing it with something expensive. Clara, Mrs. Moore warned quietly, but Clara was done being quiet. That lighthouse saved my life. 17 years ago when I was dying on the beach, that light brought Elias Turner to me. He pulled me from the water, gave me a home, taught me what it means to keep a promise, to do the right thing even when nobody's watching. That's what the lighthouse represents, not nostalgia, but the idea that some things matter more than money. Gray studied her. That's very touching. But stories don't employ people. They don't pay mortgages or send kids to college. This town is dying, and you want to let it die because of sentiment. Better to die with your soul intact than live as something unrecognizable. Easy to say when you're 17 and someone else pays your bills. Gray's voice was sharp now. Ask Mrs. Moore if she'd rather have principles or a store that makes money. Ask parents watching their kids leave if they'd rather have a lighthouse or a future for their children. He picked up his items. The vote is in 5 days. I hope for Port Haven's sake, reason wins over romance. He walked out, the bell chiming cheerfully. Clara's hand shook. Mrs. Moore came around the counter, put a hand on her shoulder. You okay, honey? No. Am I wrong? Are we being selfish? The older woman sighed. I don't know anymore. My son keeps calling from Boston, telling me to sell, move in with him. Says there's nothing left for me here. He's not wrong. Sales are down 70%. But this store was my father's, and his father's before. How do you put a price on that? She squeezed Clara's shoulder. You're not wrong to fight for what you love, but neither is everyone else. That's what makes this hard. Clara went home and found Elias staring at old photographs. Margaret and Sophie smiled out from frames, frozen in happiness that had been real once, before the sea took it. I saw Richard Gray today, Clara said. She told him about the encounter. When she finished, Elias was quiet. He's not entirely wrong. Elias finally said, Dad, hear me out. Port Haven is struggling. People are hurting. That's real. Their pain is as real as ours. We're asking them to choose history over security. That's a big ask. So what do? We show up at the vote. We speak our truth one more time. Then we accept whatever happens. That's democracy. We don't get to override everyone else's needs just because our cause feels righteous. But nothing, sweetheart. Gentle but firm. I've been keeping this light 20 years because I believed it mattered. I still do. But if Port Haven decides otherwise, I'll accept that. I'll be sad, angry even. But I'll accept it, because I'm part of this community, not above it. Clara wanted to argue, but she saw the exhaustion in his eyes. The stress had aged him. She noticed for the first time how his hands trembled slightly. Are you feeling okay? I'm old, Clara, old and tired, but I'll be fine. But she worried. Over the next days, she watched him more carefully.
He was eating less, sleeping poorly. She'd hear him up at night, walking the cottage, checking the light. The night before the vote, Port Haven held its final town meeting. The community center was packed, emotions running high. People shouted over each other. The mayor banged her gavel repeatedly. When final comments came, Elias stood. The room quieted, though not as quickly as before. "I'll be brief. Tomorrow you'll vote. Whatever you decide, I understand. I don't agree with all of you, but I understand. This is your home, your future. You have every right to choose." He paused, gaze sweeping the room. "But remember something. A lighthouse doesn't just guide ships. It reminds us who we are. It says we're the kind of people who keep lights burning, who honor promises, who believe some things are worth maintaining, even when it's expensive or inconvenient. If you vote to tear it down, you're not just losing a building. You're losing part of your identity. Maybe you'll gain something better. Maybe the resort will bring prosperity. I hope it does, but you can't get back what you destroy. Choose carefully." He sat. Clara held his hand tight. Richard Gray stood next, confident and polished. "I respect Mr. Turner's passion, but passion doesn't create jobs. Investment does. Port Haven has a choice. Cling to a symbol that served its purpose a century ago, or embrace a future that will serve your children and grandchildren. I know which choice I'd make for my family." He looked at Elias with something almost like pity. "The past is important, but the living matter more than monuments. Vote for your families. Vote for your future." He sat to thunderous applause from half the room. The other half sat in stony silence. The meeting ended with no clear victor. The vote would tell. Clara and Elias walked home through cold November wind. The lighthouse beam swept across them, steady and sure. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Elias said as they reached the cottage, "I want you to know, this has been a good life. Taking care of you, keeping this light, a good life. No regrets. Don't talk like you're saying goodbye. I'm 70, sweetheart. Every day is potentially a goodbye. I'm just making sure you know." He kissed her forehead and went inside, leaving Clara alone in darkness with only the lighthouse beam for company. She looked up at the light, that faithful promise made of glass and electricity and human devotion. "Please," she whispered, "please let us keep this." The light rotated, sweeping past her, offering no answers, only illumination, only the promise it had always made. "I am here. I am watching. The darkness will not win. Not tonight." Tomorrow would bring the vote. Tomorrow would bring the answer. And Clara had the terrible feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. The day of the vote arrived. Clara woke to find Elias already at the lighthouse, standing in the lamp room with his hand on the brass rail. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. "Haven't slept in days." They stood together watching dawn break. "I'm scared," Clara said. "Me too." By 6:30 p.m., the community center was packed. TV crews had arrived. The story of a small town choosing between tradition and survival had caught regional attention. Richard Gray presented first, flanked by associates with impressive renderings. Port Haven Retreat will employ 200 people, full benefits, competitive wages, will fund a historical museum, preserve lighthouse artifacts, name the restaurant the keepers watch. He looked at Elias. "Mr. Turner, I've read the logs from every keeper since 18. I'm not destroying legacy, I'm giving it new purpose." Strong applause. Clara's stomach sank. Mayor Hendricks gestured to Clara and Elias. They walked to the front together, but Elias motioned for Clara to speak. "That lighthouse is a promise Port Haven made over 100 years ago," Clara began, voice steady despite her nerves. "Through wars and storms, this town kept that promise. Some promises aren't meant to evolve. They're meant to be kept exactly as made." She looked around the room. "You're voting on whether to be the generation that said money matters more than keeping your word. That light saved my life. You call it nostalgia, I call it love. And love is worth fighting for." Scattered applause, perhaps a third of the room. Ballots were distributed. 20 silent minutes of marking choices, then counting. Mayor Hendricks returned, face unreadable. "The vote is 287 to 193 in favor of accepting Gray and Company's proposal." Half the room erupted in cheers. Clara felt Elias sag beside her, his face pale. "Dad." "I'm okay," he said, but he looked broken. Gray was already at the front, shaking hands. Associates pulled out contracts. If we could have Mr. Gray and Mayor Hendricks at the signing table. Clara stood to leave. As she did, her silver necklace, the only thing from her past, caught on her collar. The clasp broke. The pendant clattered across the floor, rolling to rest at the signing table. Embarrassed, Clara rushed forward to retrieve it. Gray bent at the same moment, his hand closing around the crescent moon pendant. He froze. Color drained from his face. He turned the pendant over, hands shaking. There was an inscription on the back, worn almost smooth, but Gray could read it. He looked up at Clara as if seeing a ghost. "Where did you get this?" "I don't know. It's from before the storm. The only thing I had when Mr. Turner found me." Gray's voice cracked. "What's your name?" "Clara." "Clara Turner." "Clara Gray," he whispered. The room went silent. "Your name is Clara Gray. Your mother was Elizabeth. She called you her little wave. She died when you were 4 cancer. I fell apart after, started drinking." Tears streamed down his face. "I gave you this necklace on your 7th birthday. 3 months later, I took you on my yacht, but I'd been drinking. A storm hit. The boat capsized. I grabbed the life raft, but you went into the water. Coast Guard searched for days, found nothing. For 10 years I thought you were dead." Clara couldn't breathe. "No, Elias is my father. You're just—" Gray pulled out his wallet with shaking hands, showing photographs. A woman with brilliant green eyes. Elizabeth Gray. Beside her a little girl with the same green eyes Clara saw in mirrors every day. "Oh my God," Clara whispered. Elias came forward, hands on Clara's shoulders, steadying her. Gray looked at him, face twisted with emotion. "You've had her all this time, my daughter. I hired investigators, never stopped searching, and she was here. I didn't know," Elias said firmly. "I found a dying girl on the beach. No one claimed her. Where were you? Why no missing persons report? I reported it in Portland where we'd sailed from. But I was drunk. They arrested me for negligence. My lawyers buried it. God, I was so destroyed." He looked at Clara, desperate. "Can I?" Clara looked to Elias, confused and scared. "It's okay, sweetheart," Elias said softly. Gray stepped forward, and Clara found herself in his arms, him sobbing, whispering apologies. And Clara cried too, not because she'd found her biological father, but because she understood what the lighthouse had truly done. It had saved 2 lives that night, given them both second chances. Gray pulled back, looking at Clara with wonder. "I missed everything." "Not everything," Clara said quietly. "Elias gave me a good childhood." Gray turned to Elias. Thank you for loving her. She saved me too." Mayor Hendricks cleared her throat. "Mr. Gray, the contracts." Gray looked at the unsigned papers, then at Clara, at Elias, at the lighthouse visible through windows, its light beginning to rotate. "No, we're not signing. The lighthouse stays." Chaos erupted. "The lighthouse stays," Gray repeated louder. "We'll redesign, build around it. That light gave me back my daughter, kept her alive when my negligence should have killed her, led this man to save her." He looked around. "I didn't understand what it meant, but I do now. It's a promise that was kept when everything failed. I won't break it, not for any amount of money." He turned to Clara and Elias. "I'm sorry, for threatening your home, for not seeing what mattered." The room was stunned. Then Mrs. Moore started clapping. Others joined. Soon the entire room applauded, even many who'd voted yes, moved by the reunion. Clara looked at Elias, who pulled her close, tears on his face. "See, sweetheart, the light always finds a way." Outside, the lighthouse continued its rotation, keeping its promise, guiding the lost home. The community center emptied slowly, people whispering about what they'd witnessed. Clara, Elias, and Richard Gray remained, sitting in 3 folding chairs. For a long time no one spoke. "I don't know what to do," Clara finally said. "I don't know how to feel." "You don't have to know," Elias said gently. Gray leaned forward. "Do you remember anything? About me, your mother, our life before?" Clara closed her eyes. "Sometimes I dream of a woman singing, soft hands braiding hair, lavender, but I never knew if they were real. Your mother loved lavender." Gray said. She'd sing you to sleep every night. The Water is Wide was your favorite. Clara shivered. She knew that song, had hummed it without knowing why. I have nightmares about sinking, she said. I thought they were from the storm where Elias found me, but they might be from the boat accident. Gray finished, face twisting. Because I was drunk and stupid. You were human, Elias said. You made a terrible mistake. You've carried that guilt 10 years. Gray looked at him. How can you be understanding? I threatened your home. You didn't know Clara was alive. You were broken, trying to outrun pain by building things. I did the same, except I maintained a lighthouse instead. We all grieve differently. Clara took both their hands. Maybe the lighthouse was meant to save all three of us. Gray's voice was urgent. I need to know everything. Every year I missed. Will you tell me? So Clara did, with Elias filling details. She told Gray about learning to speak again, trust again, the first lighthouse climb, elementary school, learning to maintain the light, high school, her friends, her dreams of studying marine biology. She told him about belonging in Port Haven, how the lighthouse became identity, how she'd made peace with being a mystery, because what she had with Elias was real and enough. Gray listened, cycling through emotions, joy at who his daughter had become, grief at what he'd missed, gratitude toward Elias. I don't deserve this, he finally said. I don't deserve you back. Maybe not, Clara said honestly, but life doesn't work on deserve. The lighthouse didn't save me because I earned it. It saved me because Elias was there. Maybe it saved you too, gave you a chance to be better. When did you become so wise? I had a good teacher. She squeezed Elias's hand. What happens now? Gray asked. I don't want to disrupt your life. You have a father, a home, but I'd like to know you, be part of your life, if you'll let me. Clara looked at Elias for guidance. This is your choice, Elias said. I'll support whatever you decide. Nothing changes that you're my daughter. Meeting your biological father doesn't erase 17 years. It just adds to your story. I'd like to know you too, Clara told Gray. But slowly, this is so much to process. However long you need. I've waited 10 years. They talked for another hour. Gray told stories about Elizabeth, about Clara as a toddler. Clara listened hungrily, piecing together who she'd been before. When Gray finally stood to leave, he pulled out a business card. My personal cell. Call any time, day or night. At the door he turned to Elias. Thank you, for saving her, for sharing her now when you have every right to be resentful. You're a better man than I am. I'm just a man who got a second chance, Elias said. Same as you're getting now. What we do with second chances, that's what matters. After Gray left, Clara hugged Elias. You're not losing me. You're my dad. That doesn't change. I know, sweetheart. That evening, they climbed the lighthouse stairs together as always. The ritual felt the same but charged with new meaning. The light saved all three of us, Clara said, as they watched the sun set. Maybe that's what lights do, Elias replied. They don't just show the way, they give us reasons to keep trying, to believe in second chances. The light blazed to life, beginning its rotation. Despite all the changes, this remained constant. The promise, the home she'd found 17 years ago. Nothing could change that. Clara woke to November sunlight. For a moment she thought the previous night had been a dream. Then she saw Elias at the kitchen table with the newspaper. The Port Haven Gazette's front page showed Clara and Richard Gray at the moment of recognition. Headline: Tycoon finds lost daughter, saves lighthouse. Small town, big story, Elias said. Clara's phone had dozens of messages. Everyone wanted details. She put it face down. I don't know what to tell them. You don't have to tell them anything. This is your life. A knock at the door. Richard Gray stood there in jeans and a sweater instead of his usual suit. Morning. I hope I'm not intruding. I thought we could talk. Over coffee, Gray said. I want to be part of your life, if you'll let me. But I don't want to be presumptuous or disruptive. I still want to know you, Clara said. But slowly, you're my biological father, but Elias is my dad. You understand? I do. I could never replace what he's done. They agreed Gray would visit on weekends, take Clara to dinner sometimes, get to know her gradually. He told them about Elizabeth, a marine biologist who'd loved the ocean, who'd made him promise to be a good father, a promise he'd failed. She would have loved what you've become. Gray told Clara, you have her eyes. Her heart. After Gray left, Clara asked Elias, are you really okay with this? Am I scared of losing you? A little, but I know you. You're loyal, you don't abandon people. So yes, I'm okay, because you're worth sharing. You're not losing me. You saved my life and raised me. That doesn't change. That day, Mayor Hendricks called. Gray was already working on a revised plan, a smaller sustainable resort preserving the lighthouse as centerpiece. The restaurant would be nearby, not replacing the light. He proposed fully restoring the lighthouse, maybe opening it for tours. Port Haven buzzed with wonder. People who'd been divided found themselves united by the miraculous story. Mrs. Moore brought groceries. Mr. Dennison brought books about lighthouses. Even people who'd voted for development came to apologize. That evening, Clara and Elias climbed the lighthouse stairs as always. The light saved all three of us, Clara said, watching the sunset. Maybe that's what lights do. They give us reasons to find our way back, to believe in second chances. The light blazed to life, beginning its rotation. Despite everything, this remained constant. The promise, the home, and nothing could change that.
Over the following months, Port Haven transformed. Richard Gray kept his word. His company redesigned Port Haven Retreat, a smaller eco-friendly resort that enhanced rather than erased the town's character. The lighthouse became the project's centerpiece. Gray funded a complete restoration. The tower was repainted, the lens polished to perfection, the keeper's cottage renovated while maintaining its historic character. The automated systems were upgraded but kept, ensuring the light would burn for generations. The new restaurant, the Keeper's Table, was built on a different part of the point with panoramic ocean views. Its design echoed the lighthouse's architecture. Inside, walls displayed historical photographs and keeper logs. A bronze plaque near the entrance read, "In honor of all who kept the light burning, and all who were guided home by its beam." The marina was redesigned to accommodate fishing boats, alongside pleasure craft, supporting local fishermen while attracting tourists. 50 eco-cottages were built using sustainable materials blending into the landscape. Gray hired locally wherever possible. Mrs. Moore's son came back from Boston to manage the resort's supply chain. Bill Shaw's boat repair shop got a contract maintaining the marina. Larry Henderson's hardware store became the resort's primary supplier. Port Haven didn't become a playground for the wealthy. It became a model for how development and preservation could coexist. Through it all, Clara and Gray built their relationship carefully. He visited most weekends. They'd have dinner, walk the beach, talk about Elizabeth and Clara's early childhood. Gray showed her photo albums, told her stories, helped her reclaim fragments of her lost past. But Clara always returned to the lighthouse, to Elias. That was home. That was constant. Gray understood. He never pushed, never demanded more than Clara was ready to give. He was grateful for every moment she shared. One Saturday in spring, Gray brought Clara to the newly completed Keeper's Table for its soft opening. They sat at a window table overlooking the lighthouse. "I want to show you something," Gray said, pulling out a document. "The deed to the lighthouse and surrounding land. I've arranged to transfer it to a conservation trust. It can never be sold or developed. It's protected forever." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "You did that. It's the least I could do. That light gave you back to me. I'm making sure it can do the same for others who might need saving." "Thank you," Clara whispered. Gray reached across the table, taking her hand. "No, thank you, for giving me a second chance. For letting me be your father, even in this limited way. For being extraordinary despite everything I put you through. You didn't put me through anything. The ocean did. You've just been living with the consequences, same as me." By early summer, Elias's health began declining. He was 71 now, and the years of solitary lighthouse keeping had taken their toll. He moved slower, tired more easily, sometimes lost his breath climbing the lighthouse stairs. One evening, he sat Clara down at the cottage. I need to talk to you about something, sweetheart. I'm getting old, my body's reminding me of that more every day, and I want to make sure you're prepared. Dad, don't, listen, I've made arrangements. When I'm gone, this cottage is yours. I've also spoken with the Conservation Trust. They'll need a new lighthouse keeper, mostly ceremonial, since the systems are automated, but someone to maintain the building, give tours, keep the tradition alive. I've recommended you for the position. You're not going anywhere, Clara said fiercely. Not today, but someday, and when that day comes I need to know you'll keep the light burning. Will you promise me that? Through tears, Clara nodded. I promise. Good. Elias smiled. That's all I needed to hear. In August, on Clara's 18th birthday, both Gray and Elias threw her a party at the keeper's table. The whole town came. Maya and Jordan, Mrs. Moore, Mr. Dennison, Mayor Hendricks, even people who'd once opposed the lighthouse's preservation. Gray gave a toast. 18 years ago I lost my daughter to my own negligence and grief. I thought she was gone forever. But she wasn't lost, she was being cared for by a man better than I could ever hope to be. Elias Turner saved her life and raised her to be the remarkable woman we're celebrating today. I'm grateful beyond words for the chance to know her now, and for Elias's generosity in sharing her with me. He raised his glass, to Clara, to Elias, and to the lighthouse that brought us all together. To the lighthouse, the crowd echoed. Later, as the party wound down, Clara stood outside on the restaurant's deck with both her fathers. The lighthouse beam swept across them in its eternal rotation. I'm the luckiest person alive, Clara said. I have two fathers who love me, a town that fought for what mattered, and a light that never goes out. We're the lucky ones, Elias said softly. You gave us all a reason to be better. Gray nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in his throat. They stood together in comfortable silence, 3 lives intertwined by fate and water, and a promise kept in darkness. The light swept past again, and again, and again, faithful, eternal, home. Winter came early the year Clara turned 19. She was in her first semester at the University of Maine, studying marine biology and environmental science, commuting from Port Haven 3 days a week. Elias grew weaker through November. He could no longer climb the lighthouse stairs. Clara did it for him, checking systems and cleaning the lens while he watched from the cottage window. On a cold December night, with snow falling softly and the lighthouse beam cutting through white flakes, Elias called Clara to his bedside. It's time, sweetheart, he said, his voice weak but peaceful. Dad, no, I'll call an ambulance. No ambulances. I want to be here in this cottage, with the light turning above us. That's all I want. Clara climbed into bed beside him like she had as a child during thunderstorms, her head on his shoulder. Tell me about the light, Elias whispered. So Clara did. She described how it looked from the gallery, how the beam swept across the dark water, how reliable and true it was. She told him about the first time he'd taken her up there, how magical it had seemed, how safe she'd felt with his hand on her shoulder. You kept your promise, she told him. You kept the light burning, you kept me safe, you were the best father anyone could ask for. And you, Elias said, were the gift I never expected. The light in my darkness. I love you, Clara. Always remember that. I love you too, Dad. Elias Turner passed peacefully in his sleep that night, with the lighthouse beam rotating faithfully above him and his daughter's hand in his. The funeral was held on a bright winter day. It seemed like all of Port Haven came. Gray stood beside Clara throughout, a supportive presence but not replacing the man they mourned. He saved my life twice, Clara said in her eulogy. Once when he pulled me from the beach 17 years ago, and again every single day after by showing me what it means to keep promises, to love without condition, to be a light in someone else's darkness. I'll miss him every day, but I'll keep his promise. I'll keep the light burning. True to Elias's arrangements, Clara became the official lighthouse keeper. The Conservation Trust gave her a modest salary and the cottage to live in. Her duties were light, maintaining the building, giving tours to tourists visiting Port Haven Retreat, and keeping the tradition alive. She balanced it with her studies, determined to become the marine biologist her biological mother had been, while honoring the lighthouse keeper her adopted father had been. Gray visited often. Their relationship had deepened over the past year. He'd never replace Elias, but he'd carved out his own place in Clara's life. He was there for her grief,
helped her adjust to life without Elias, provided support without smothering. A year after Elias's death, on the anniversary of that December night, Clara and Gray stood together at the lighthouse. "He would be proud of you," Gray said, "of how you've honored his memory." "I hope so." Clara looked up at the rotating beam. "Sometimes I feel like he's still here, you know. Like part of him is in the light itself." Maybe it is. Maybe all the keepers who've served here are part of it. Their dedication, their promises, their love, maybe that's what really makes it shine. They stood in silence for a moment. "I have something to tell you," Gray said. "I've decided to step back from my company, promote my second-in-command to see. I want to spend more time here, in Port Haven. Get to know you better, be present in a way I never was before." Clara looked at him, surprised. Really, I've spent my whole adult life building things, making money, chasing the next deal, but none of it meant anything compared to finding you. You're my second chance, Clara. I don't want to waste it." "I'd like that," Clara said, and meant it. Port Haven thrived. The retreat brought steady tourism without overwhelming the town's character. The lighthouse became a symbol of the community's resilience, featured in travel magazines and documentaries. People came from across the country to see the lighthouse that saved a family. Clara gave tours, telling the story of Elias Turner, the man who'd kept a promise for 20 years. She told visitors about the night he'd saved her life, about the dedication it took to maintain this light, about the importance of keeping promises even when nobody was watching. "Lighthouses remind us who we are," she'd say, echoing Elias's words. "They say we're the kind of people who keep lights burning, who honor promises, who believe some things are worth maintaining even when it's expensive or inconvenient." On the second anniversary of Elias's death, Port Haven held a ceremony. They unveiled a bronze statue at the base of the lighthouse, Elias Turner, looking out to sea, one hand shielding his eyes, as if searching for someone lost in the darkness. The plaque read, "Elias Turner, keeper of the light, keeper of promises. He taught us that some lights don't just guide ships, they remind us where home is." Clara stood with Gray, Maya, Jordan, Mrs. Moore, and dozens of townspeople. Mayor Hendricks gave a speech. Several people shared stories about Elias, his quiet kindness, his dedication, his impact on Port Haven. When it was Clara's turn to speak, she stood before the statue of the man who'd been her father in every way that mattered. "Elias Turner taught me that love isn't about biology or blood, it's about showing up, it's about keeping watch even when you're tired, keeping promises even when they're hard, keeping light in the darkness, even when it seems like nobody notices." She looked up at the lighthouse, its beam beginning to rotate as dusk fell. "He taught me that we save each other, not just once, but over and over through small acts of kindness and large acts of devotion, through patience and presence, and refusing to let people face the darkness alone." Her voice grew stronger. "This lighthouse has stood here for over 100 years, it's weathered storms and neglect, and nearly being torn down. But it's still here, still keeping its promise, still reminding us who we are, and what matters." She looked at the crowd. "Elias kept this light burning, not because ships needed it, but because we needed it. We needed to know that someone was watching, someone cared, someone believed that keeping promises mattered even in a world that often doesn't." She placed her hand on the statue's bronze shoulder. "Thank you, Dad, for saving me, for loving me, for showing me how to be a keeper of light. I'll keep your promise, the light will burn, always." As if in response, the lighthouse beam swept across the crowd, bathing them all in light for one brilliant moment. Clara looked up, smiling through tears. "Some lights don't just guide ships, they remind us where home is, they show us who we can be. They promise us that even in the darkest night, someone is watching, someone cares, someone will keep the light burning." And in Port Haven, Maine, at a lighthouse on a rocky point overlooking the Atlantic, that promise would be kept. By Clara Turner Gray, keeper of the light, keeper of promises, keeper of her father's legacy, forever.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.